You're listening to WorkWire, sponsored by Career Club and SHRM. Career Club has a range of services aimed at job seekers with an empathetic approach. Whether you are a job seeker yourself, know someone who is in job search, or an HR professional looking to bring a more empathetic approach to transitioning employees, check out career.club. If you are an HR professional seeking to enhance your skills, subscribe to SHRM and explore their extensive resources. Visit shrm.org. That's shrm.org.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Goodwin and welcome to another episode of the WorkWire. I'm the president of Career Club and I'm joined by my good friend, the president CEO of SHRM, Johnny C. Taylor Jr. Johnny, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Well as any of us can do. We're at a very interesting spot in our country, in fact, in the world right now. So I can't wait to talk about it in the context of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so our topic today is emotional intelligence in leadership. And, Johnny, I go back to the SHRM conference in June in Vegas, and your keynote or the whatever the ending speech is called at the conference. And you talked about just the importance of HR in particular as being the experts in people. And it was some of that was in the context of AI, but more of it was in the new abnormal. And what's never going to go out of style is understanding people. That we're not work producing units, we're not cells on a spreadsheet, we're sure as heck not machines, but we're people with all the complexity that goes with that. And you had recently done a post on LinkedIn that really got my attention that I thought was excellent. It was talking about emotional intelligence in leadership. And so I'll sort of hand the mic off to you and let's sort of pick the thread up from there.
Well, it's now more than ever. And you've heard people use that phrase a lot, but it is really now more than ever, given the divide that exists, the polarization that exists, the desire for employees to understand the culture, to be led, to feel safe, and to thrive. This is a topic that we've just got to discuss. It's interesting. SHRM did some research in our workplace study of the workforce or workplace. And it basically found that employees now more than ever desire and are increasingly demanding empathetic leadership.
Yeah.
That's what got me to thinking about this. I've been talking about this since 2018, that our country is experiencing an empathy deficit. So I went down the path of empathy, and then I realized that the bigger issue, it's kind of hard to ask people who do not have emotional intelligence or high levels of emotional intelligence to be empathetic.
Yep.
It's like asking someone who has a lower IQ to be like a mathematician or something. These things aren't working. We've got to help build the skill first so that people can, be their best, whatever that is. And I acknowledge that every leader is not going to be high on the emotional quotient side, but emotional intelligence is increasingly a part of the requirements list for leaders. And it's because the employment, the workplace is so diverse. Human beings, as you pointed out, are so complicated and complex at once. And they're changing because it depends upon what's happening in the world around them at any given time. During the pandemic, there was a way that we managed human beings and a way that they responded. Post-pandemic, there's a different person. In the middle of it, do they work hybrid? What's their relationship with work? You were just talking with me about this whole big question of, do I even want to work? With whom do I want to work? When do I want to work? Where do I want to work? And so we've asked managers, people managers in particular, up through the executive ranks to manage this moving target called human beings. And it has therefore led me to know and believe that emotional intelligence is absolutely something that we've got to study, discuss, and help build within our leaders if we want them to do this. And so fundamentally, I know you've broken this down, but I'd love your thoughts on the first of those, which is self-regulation.
Yes. So I kind of go to, I think two of these are tied, which is self-awareness and self-regulation. And the first thing that popped in my mind looking at that list was John Maxwell in order to lead others, one must first lead himself. And
Mhm.
so, I cannot be a good leader of other people if I can't even lead myself, right? So that
And a lot of
requires,
folks can't do that.
come again.
I said a lot of people can't.
Right. And so this self-awareness and self-regulation, we even see it in our work at Career Club, where people genuinely, there is a self-awareness deficit. And I don't mean that derogatorily, judgmentally, just is. And like a topic that they haven't really ever kind of paused to think about. Not that they can't contemplate it, they just haven't. And so, again, to your point about bringing things that can be taught, I can't make I can't make your IQ higher. I can teach you maybe some new things. I believe emotional intelligence can be taught. I do think that you sort of come from the factory with a certain proclivity for it, but I do believe that these things can be taught. So, like, we use assessments like StrengthsFinder to to
Mhm.
to help people become more self-aware. So now I know what I'm good at. I also know that some of these strengths have downsides. Uh, our,
Right.
our, our common
Most.
friend, our common friend Roy will talk about balconies and basements. So yeah, this is a
That's right.
good thing when it's good, but know too that, like, your attention to detail sometimes can get in the way of needing to be agile, make a decision with
That's right.
imperfect information, whatever. So, but that's a self-awareness. But then self-awareness, I think, in your model, leads to self-regulation. Now, with that understanding, I know that I might have an inclination to react emotionally in a certain situation, or to be too quiet in other situations where I
Right.
need to stand up and say something. So,
Right.
you know,
So, Bob, I was going to say, so the challenge for it is, so there's a saying that we used to take for truth, and that was, if you know better, you do better. Not necessarily so. And I'd love you to comment. I mean, you do this really well. So we self-awareness is a critical part of this. Yes, you have to start from, am I prepared for getting to know myself? Can I get past? Because at this point, you're 40, 50 years old, older. As a leader, typically your leaders aren't
yeah,
20
yeah,
and 30, right? So they're all the way up there. And I've done pretty well not knowing who I really am. I'm actually okay with that because I know what I've decided I am. Like, right? It's my
right.
looking glass self. And so, I've found, and I'd love you to react to this, what happens when you have a person who actually, in your work and in the work that you do with a number of really smart people, you say, okay, this is kind of who you are, using all of these tools, strengths finders, and all of the various tools that they have. And you say, let's have a conversation. This is who you are. What's been your experience with then that translating into knowing who I am, how to regulate self and control self? So I know that I have a temper. I know that and I'm not saying Johnny Taylor, I know that I dive into the detail. How do you help people take this self awareness? And we know the biggest barrier to change in successful people is success.
Yes.
Because if it's worked this long, right, this is why I'm in the C suite. So you are going to suggest to me that the very damn thing
Yep.
that got me here,
Yeah.
you want me to change?
Yeah,
What's that
I
about?
was, no, no, I hear you. And I was thinking about that coming into this conversation, because you take, like, this is probably a lame example, but like the football coach that swears and yells at the player, because
Right.
that's what's always worked. I'm Mike Ditka, and I just, scream at you louder, and then maybe you'll hear it. And it works until it doesn't work. It works until it
Yeah.
doesn't work. And, we were talking, just sort of as you were creating some of the context for what we're talking about, maybe that worked on a boomer and the people that you grew up with. Maybe it worked with, Gen X, but then it stopped kind of working as well with millennials.
That's,
And it sure as heck isn't going to work on a Gen Z person.
that's right.
Like, either they're gonna
That's right.
they're gonna quit, they're gonna quiet quit, they're gonna melt. Something's gonna happen, but it will not work with them. And so, just because it's gotten you this far is no past performance is no predictor of future results. I mean,
Not necessarily. right? But
but you're
that's the
right, but usually we only address change when we're put in a corner.
force. That's right. And I'm glad. So that's where I wanted to land. And I knew you're going to get there because that's the point is the way that this has worked historically. We know for a ton of reasons, namely the new generation just has no tolerance for it. The fact that we are now talking about empathy seriously as business leaders, 20 years ago, you know this, no one took that seriously. The word culture was a joke.
Right.
CEOs were joking, oh, here we go. Here come the HR kumbaya people talking about culture.
Yep.
Give them foosball machines and whatever, and they'll be
Yeah.
fine. That's a great culture. We've evolved very quickly from an environment where culture was kind of cute and a nice to have
Yes.
to it's now a requirement. The workforce and the newer generations, and that's one thing I love about millennials. They dragged us kicking and screaming, as much as we joke about them, into this acceptance that culture actually matters, how you do things, not necessarily the outcomes. The ends don't justify the means for them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's like you've got to come. We do need to make money, and I get it, but how we make this money matters as well. And so I think that's it. So you're so right. So we got this self-awareness thing. The biggest challenge for leaders right now, if you're out there when we talk about emotional intelligence, is actually now with that self-awareness, being able to self-regulate because you're the boss. Rarely can, once you're in the middle center suite, there's no one writing you up. Even if you have a board, right? At the end of the day, generally speaking, you're the boss and you can be a terrible person or a good person. There's nothing until you violate the law other than losing employees, employee churn. You can kind of get away with it. So this is very much about self-regulation and controlling your emotional responses.
Yeah. So what I want to say is turnover is one of them. So attrition would be one. Engagement is another. That you're just not getting the best from your people.
That's right.
They're not coming to you with new ideas. They're not being proactive. They're not anticipating problems. Because they just don't care that much because you've made me not care because you've demonstrated to me you don't care about me. So, okay, I'll return the favor. I don't care that much, which also leads to productivity. And all these things ultimately lead to growth and profitability issues.
That's
So,
not right.
there's an entrepreneur friend of mine who's got a great expression. He says, Bob, I want to sell painkillers, not vitamins. Emotional intelligence is a painkiller. It is not a vitamin. It's not just nice to have. It's good to have chicken soup. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but I feel no, this is good for your business. To me, this is highly analogous to like diversity and inclusion. This isn't being nice. This is being smart.
So, okay, let me put this back to you. So, what do you say to the leader who says, got it, I'm low on emotional intelligence. Let's just call it that. And that's it. So isn't the answer really for me just to hire other people who are low on emotional intelligence and we all just do what we do? There are 8 billion people on a planet. I hire 10,000 of them, find 10,000 people who think, operate, process the way I do, and all will be good. Because that's much easier than me trying to correct my 50-year-old self. What about I'm just going to hire people like me and surround myself with it? And if people don't think that way, if you have a high need for empathy and a high need for, then go work somewhere else because there's an argument that says that's interesting. How would you react to that?
I mean, that would be shocking to me that somebody got to the CEO level or the C-suite.
Well, but that's the self-awareness. Let's play devil's advocate. Be self-aware.
That's not my answer to
where
your question. It's just my reaction to your question. But it may work in the short run. There may be enough inertia in the business that will allow you to let's just go look at Fortune 500 companies that aren't Fortune 500 companies anymore. Nothing's forever. Things change, right? Business conditions change. And I think as important as anything, the constitution of the workforce, particularly with Gen Z, is changing.
Yes.
And you are going to age out of people that will put up with your BS and whatever model it is that you think that you've got, because they're not being replaced with like-minded people, what you're going to get are disengaged, unproductive people that actually don't care about your business. And why you think that's a good idea, to me, is a riddle. And I'm going to go buy your competitor's stock and I'm going to short yours.
That's no, I think that's right, so I asked it intentionally to be the provocateur.
I know you're being provocative with that.
But guess what? Kind of. There are a lot of leaders who, there are still football coaches who have a meltdown every time someone makes a mistake, one of their players makes a mistake. And when they win, we celebrate that person, right? That is the coach of the year. So, we hear it, and that's the only, we use a lot of team language and jargon, team and this and that and a coach. But some of those coaches don't exhibit great leadership behavior. And we are tolerant of it. And I do think it has a cascading effect on society because, I go in and I see name the coach yell at his people and da 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 da, and then they get better results because he yells at them. Maybe I should yell at my people a little bit more. Maybe I'm being too nice. So we're in this, I think back to that cycle that we're on. No question that Generation Z and millennials are going to be a lot less willing than baby boomers, traditionalists, even X's, to tolerate these low emotional intelligence leaders. That being said, here's a demographic reality. There are a lot more of X and above than there are millennials and Generation Z.
Today.
Today. That's right. In fact, the workforce is 60% non-millennial, non-Gen Z. Half of, just a funny two stats that are very interesting to me. Bureau of Labor Statistics has told us that half of the jobs that will be filled between now and 2030 will be filled by people 55 and older. It also says the fastest growing segment of the U.S. workforce are people 75 and older. Yes, not a typo, 75 and older. They come from an era and a way. So we're going to have to pull some of those leaders kicking and screaming into what is relevant to millennials and Generation Z, because guess what? They're like, listen, I still am managing the way the majority of the workforce believes it should be managed. Now, I throw that to you. I already know how insane that logic is, but I want to tell you, we see that. We acquired a group, the CEO Academy. So I get to spend a lot of time with CEOs, increasingly more than I do with CHROs. And it is fascinating to see that mindset.
The one thing that I do think about, somebody that we both, better than I do, Ed Bastian at Delta,
Yes.
in his virtuous circle, you take care of the
Yes.
frontline people. That is your priority. You take care of the frontline people. They know that you care, that you've got their back, you've empowered them, basically demonstrating a very high level of emotional intelligence. They will take care of our customers. And nobody's got higher sat in the industry than Delta consistently. And then those customers will take care of our shareholders. And that gives us more money to invest in our frontline people to have an even better service experience. And, I think that again, in the not even that long run, the proof's in the pudding that if you take care of your people, they will take care of you. And you talk so much about this, Johnny, but the world is just different and is not going back to February of 2020. It's never going back to that. And I think that there are a lot of CEOs who are struggling trying to understand with like return to office mandates and stuff like that. It's like, I just want to press the go back in time machine button and go back to what we had. And you said it very well. We built that culture over decades, that work style. It's going to take a long time to build the new work style. But I think that, again, I know that you're being a little bit provocative, just to like, let's kind of examine this issue, from multiple angles. But, the companies that do not address the needs of their people as their people articulate them will be suboptimal relative to their competitors who do.
So I agree with you. You know, as I said, now I want to pivot to something else because a lot of times we focus on leaders and how they lead. Let's talk about the population they are leading. So I shared with you an article from the Atlantic, and basically the headline is basically, why did America become so mean? I mean, it really was interesting. It caught my attention. How America Got Mean was the actual title. And it went through and talked about the workforce and actually generally all of our American society. And it was shocking. And I think you've experienced it. I've experienced it where it feels like everyone is mad.
Hmm.
The person next to you, if someone cuts just close to your lane in the car, you blow, and you don't just blow once, you blow for 3 minutes down the road and you ride up next to them. Like everyone is mad and they're becoming increasingly mean. So this is a real problem and opportunity for leaders. When you think about emotional intelligence is, yes, we talk about self-regulation and controlling, and we talk about self-awareness.
Hmm.
Like we've got a lot of work to do with the 165 million people who go to work every day in our country alone to inject this idea of emotional intelligence. So where am I going with it? One, I'd like to talk about that, but is that I think the most compelling argument to leaders about why they need to model this behavior is because they're just that. They are the models. And so, to the extent they begin to exhibit better behavior, less mean behavior, more empathetic behavior, more caring, compassion, etc., when they do that, it could have a cascading, back to this, effect on the broader society. And business has a huge, huge responsibility in our society to help mold our mores and our folk ways and how people operate, our culture, big culture. So that would be the strong, actually, in addition to, because I could argue all day, okay, down the road, someone's going to eat our lunch. Well, I'll be retired by then. You know, this is going to work for at least another 5 or 7 years because of all the stats that Johnny gave. So at that point, I'm 55, I'll be 62, 65. I don't care. That's the next man's problem or woman's problem, right? So I'm not being glib about it. I'm saying but when you say we have a responsibility as business leaders to improve society and culture, we talk about conscious capitalism. It's more
Hmm.
than green. It's deeper than that. Like we have to make society better. And we have an increasingly mean society. And I think it's because we've modeled that behavior.
Yeah, wow. So we've never talked about something I'm getting ready to say before, and I'd like your reaction to this. There's a difference between a leader and an executive. Just because you got the title does not make you a leader.
Fair.
You're an executive at that
Yeah.
company. That is true. But are you truly leading? So ponder
Great.
that one for a minute. But the other thing I was going to say, Johnny, is on my other podcast, Career Club Live, recently we had an emotional intelligence expert, Dr. Dan Hill. He's written a number of books on emotional intelligence. And we talked about anger. And what I learned
Yes.
was at its core, anger, meanness, if we can use those a little synonymously, basically come down to control. That I don't feel that I have control. And we don't feel like we have control, then kind of two things happen, and they're actually highly related. One is fear and one is anger. And so my way of lashing out because you cut me off in traffic or whatever, on social media, it's a way for me to exert a little bit of control in a world where I feel like I don't have very much control at all. And when we don't feel like we have agency, that drives negative behavior because we want to
Right.
try and get back having some control. And so
Yep.
think about this as a leader of a company, that if I can help you be more empowered, feel like you've got more
Yep.
control, which is also a giant sign of respect, that I respect you
Yep.
as a person, as a professional, and I'm going to give more control over to you. Well, now I start to find fulfillment in my work, not resentment. in my work.
Right.
And so again, I think that this is not just sort of a whipped cream and cherries kind of a conversation. It's like, no, this is real meat that somebody can go and enact in their organization, like in the very
Yeah.
near term, instead of worry about how do I turn around the aircraft carrier. It's like, because you if you understand, this is emotional intelligence at its core. If you
Yes.
understand why the person is behaving the way they're behaving, then you've got the opportunity to address it in a helpful way rather than criticizing it, ignoring it, judging it,
Yep.
whatever. But you can actually be part of the solution, not just dial up the volume on why this is a problem.
I think that's brilliant, Bob. I love the way the construct, that's why I love about this show is because I don't have all of the answers. We both are experts in our own domains, and you've laid this out extremely well. I think so we kind of, as I hear it, we've kind of said there are three really compelling reasons that we should do this. One, you're right. With the new generation ushering its way in, we're not going to go back to the way it was, that there's just your workforce is going to demand it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right workforce in a service or knowledge-based economy, you're going to lose over the time period. I'm going to bet on the company that gets this right every day for the future versus the people who get it right now. Right. Okay. So yes. The other thing I think that as we think about it, we've got to make that argument. And then for people who aren't necessarily moved by that, my argument is, yeah, but you have a bigger duty and obligation to society. Our society is struggling right now because people are modeling your poor behavior, your ability to not regulate your own self-control. So you go off and yell at the second something doesn't go your way because you're losing control.
Yep.
And you do that often. All of us are human beings, and we'll have those moments where we lose our cool. But if this becomes the norm problem, and then that rolls out through our society, and then we become meaner and more angry, and that blows up at some point. The third area that you just described, and I'll never put the words on it as well as you just did, but there's yet another bigger reason to do it. And if you could just help us just once again think about those three. So there's the more practical, bottom line business reason. There's the societal reason. And then what would you kind of call what you just described?
It's the idea of empowering people and giving them agency. It's when we feel like
Gotcha.
we don't have agency. And the two things that we always have control over is our attitude and our actions. You cannot
Yes.
make, Johnny, you cannot make me feel any way. I can choose to let you make me feel a certain way, or I can
That's
choose
right.
to not let you make me, but I always get to choose my attitude and I always get to choose my actions. If this company models mean behavior, it's got an abusive leadership style, I can choose to leave. I don't have, there's a
Yep.
million other companies I could go work at. I don't have to work at this place, right? I can also choose to confront leadership and say, "Hey, I don't know if you know this exactly, but this is how it's being received, and it might be working in the short term, but I can tell you in the coffee room or on a Slack channel or Glassdoor or wherever, people are talking about this, and it's not good for you." But
Yeah.
that's up to
That's right.
the other person. But it all comes down just to the third pillar is you know enforcing this, not reinforcing this idea of agency, of giving
That's right.
control, and you're not giving control. You're helping people understand they have control.
We have control. Yeah, it's at the core of our whole work concept. We say you're an employee at will, and people read that as the company can fire me at any time. And a better way to think about it is that's true, but I can also fire the company at any time, right?
Well,
And when you do that,
we both know Katie George at McKinsey, and their
yes,
mantra is you are the author of your career.
that's right. That's
I
right.
think you know Kara Chenault Reed from Koch Industries.
Yes.
Again, they are
Hmm.
very much about that you've got a lot of autonomy, and that they
Yep.
want you to have and feel that, and they believe it so much that in an interview I did with her, she was like, this doesn't work for everybody. Some people don't want
So
that
true.
level of autonomy. They can't deal with
That's
the ambiguity that goes with that and the responsibility that goes with that. And that's okay. Go work somewhere
that's
else. But if
listen,
that
I'm the first one to say that.
and if that appeals to you, this could be a really good environment for you to thrive in.
Back to culture, and we talk about it all the time. It's just being, I call it cultural clarity. Be clear about who you are, and that doesn't mean that you should accept leaders who are very low on emotional intelligence or da da da. I mean, I'm not suggesting an excuse for being a jerk is we'll go work
Right.
somewhere else. What you and I are saying is that employees will do that, but we're a much better business if leaders can control themselves, can be aware of themselves, can use empathy, really focus on social skills. The more we do in cooperation, the more we do that, then it's a win-win for everyone. And that's just the new requirement of leadership. But Bob,
I love
that's
your
what
5 points, Johnny. One of the things that I want to just explore with you for a minute is, there's the self-awareness, which I believe leads to
yes,
the ability to self-regulate. So now I've at least got a little
yes,
bit of a handle on me. Then the next level is, okay, empathy is now engaging with another person. Now I want to understand you, right?
right,
And how I can come alongside you as an individual, which I believe then kind of leads to social skills, because now that's in a group that we're able to
yep,
work together as a group and get aligned around common causes and common results that we're looking for. And then your last point, which we haven't talked about yet, which is motivation, which is to actually get stuff done. So I see a really cool continuum of how you've laid these
yes.
points out. I'm curious, how you would
Thank
build
you.
on that.
Yeah, I mean that it is that, right? All of that naturally flows. The motivation is the actual behavior, right?
Hmm.
And not just achieving the goals, but with intentionality, wanting to do them. And we talk about engagement in the workforce, and it's very closely aligned to the idea of motivation, that people are motivated to want to do good as people and as employees, and they want the organization and the collectively to
Yeah.
do well. And that's what is really, really exciting about it's the Holy Grail. All of this arrives at motivation. If I go right to left, if it was a mathematical computation,
Yeah.
it equals. And we know how that works. So yeah, motivation is we know what it is. You know it when you see it, when you have a highly motivated workforce, when you see leaders who are motivated, you get there. That's the winning culture. So motivation is what we land on that, but it takes all of that work, starting with every leader engaging in a serious introspective process and becoming aware of self. None of this works. Like you can't get to the end without starting. You've got to go through that front door called just engaging. When you talk emotional intelligence, it has to, in my mind, I could be up for debate, but you starts with who am I? And am I willing to look at the man and the woman in the mirror and come to grips with whom that person is? As you said, the basement as well as
The
what
balcony,
was it?
the balcony.
The balcony, both of them. And all of us leaders have, really great things about us. And then we have some not so great things. And unfortunately, sometimes they're the same thing.
Mm.
It's the extreme of one can make you great. And we know of some leaders, right? Governmental leaders. I think about the likes of Bill Clinton. I mean, he had some serious balconies and some serious basements. And we see that in leaders. It's not unusual to have all of that captured in one person.
Yeah.
And we just want people to aspire more when you talk about motivation for their balconies more and stay out of the basements as
Well,
much as
one of the
they can.
things that you were talking about, Johnny, on the motivation piece, but I think it ties into all of this, is, and it even goes back to the how America got mean topic,
Yes.
is if we could assume good intent, and I've heard you talk about this, so I know I'm not saying anything that you haven't said a million times, but if we could assume good intent, the drama level would be so
Yes.
much lower. But when we assume bad intent, then you can just like go from 0 to 100 on the anger scale versus
Yes.
I don't think I understand. I know you, Johnny. Like this looks like out of pattern behavior for you. Can you help me understand? We talked in a previous episode about mental health issues that people are
Yes.
going through, and you see somebody like also not doing their work the way they used to do it on time or to the quality or whatever, rather than yelling at them like, dude, what are you doing here? It's like, Johnny, this doesn't look like the Johnny I know. Is everything okay?
Right.
That's assuming good
Right.
intent, right?
That's right.
And
That's right.
so,
And helping people go through the natural ups and downs of life.
so again, but that's a choice of attitude back on agency
Yes.
that I can choose
Yep.
to. My default mode is assume good intent until there's evidence that suggests otherwise. That's kind of innocent until proven
And
guilty. It
that's
sounds like the lawyer.
you took the words out of my mouth. Absolutely. Well, my friend, thank you. This is a really important topic and one that I hope there's not necessarily a takeaway that we have these 5 steps that we've described, but I'm hoping that leaders will, if nothing else, it'll trigger you to go through this process and ask yourself, how can I be a better leader? Because that should be your motivation. That's mine every day. I'm like, what can I do to be better? I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm wrestling with who Johnny Taylor naturally is predisposed to be, but I want to be better. And I can control my attitude and my actions, as you put perfectly.
So, Johnny, I appreciate everything that you're doing because you've got quite the platform. And when you're out there in front of CEOs, CHROs, and politicians, like policymakers, educators, and you're out there holding the banner up on emotional intelligence and leading with a capital L. I really
Yes.
appreciate it. I know that everybody who follows you and listens to you appreciates it. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening, watching today. Again, as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and comment. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, subscribing, rate, review really helps to make sure that you don't miss any episodes. But with that, Johnny, I just always come away from these so energized and motivated. So I appreciate your time and your insights.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You get this. This is the new W. It's for work wire. You get it.
There you go. Amen. Awesome. All right. Thanks,
That's
Johnny.
right.
Talk
That's
soon.
good.
Check out career.club for personalized help with your job search. Visit shrm.org to become part of the largest human resources organization worldwide.